back, gentlemen, and good morning once more. We are back to another installment of my channel, but this time it's going to be a little different. We are going to have an analogy with historical facts, and that's something different from what you're normally watching. Now let's have a look at what I mean to say. We've all known about King Midas. He was a man who was a very just king, but he had a great love for gold. And he was given a gift by the god Dionysus, which gave him the power of converting anything he touched into gold. So that's why we say King Midas, the man with the golden touch, right? But then I'm giving a comparison with the United States of America, in particular after 1945. Whatever the Americans have touched after that time, unlike Midas, who converted everything to gold, the Americans have brought only death, destruction and devastation. You can't hide it. It's something which is so apparent everywhere. Right from the time when the Americans dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killed 200,000 defenseless, innocent Japanese civilians, the Americans have been having the touch of death around them. It's a sad thing, but it's very much there. And they have always been on the losing side. I don't know how it so happens. They started with China, Chiang Kai-shek. He lost the battle with the communists under Mao Zedong and ran away. Later the Americans dumped him like a stone, as Richard Nixon went and made peace with Mao Zedong. Then we come to the battle in Korea. There again, the same story. The North Koreans and the Chinese intervened, and the Americans brought in a very famous general by the name of Douglas MacArthur, who had made history in the Second World War. And he was brought in, but he was at his wit's end. When the Chinese mounted an offensive with 50,000 soldiers across the Yalu River, he didn't know what to do. So he went to President Truman and said, hey, let's drop an atomic bomb in China. But the British Prime Minister, if I remember correctly at that time, Clement Attlee, was not in favor of it. And ultimately, it didn't go through. And the net result was that MacArthur was dismissed. He was told, okay, enough. You go home now. But the point which I'm trying to make is that the Americans could not win the war. They brought in a lot of destruction in Korea. And now the situation is so bad that at any time, a press of a button and there could be a world war. Americans went to Vietnam. We don't want to discuss the Vietnam War. It's been discussed by thousands of writers, and then everybody knows that the Americans were thoroughly beaten. But the point which I want to make is that in Vietnam they brought in death and destruction. They dropped more bombs on North Vietnam than the United States Air Force dropped on Germany during the entire period of World War II. So bad was the bombing that even the ecology of the forest changed. That's what happened. Well, they retreated. There was no choice. Then they went into 3 other wars. They fought one in Libya, they went and fought in Iraq, and then they went and fought in Afghanistan. Now you study all the 3 wars, and you will find the Americans, of course, are persona non grata in all the 3 places, but they haven't achieved anything other than bringing about death, devastation and destruction there. Look at Libya. When it was under Gaddafi, it was a nice, prosperous country. people were well looked after, there was peace. And above all, Gaddafi was opposed to Al-Qaeda. That's the crucial point. But the Americans went in, got him killed, and now Libya is a war-torn nation and nobody knows what's happening, what's going to happen next. The Syrians are there, the Turks have come in, the Russians are there, all sorts of people, and there's a civil war on. Same thing in Iraq. They had a partial trial in which Saddam Hussein was hanged. It is a trial of no meaning. The principle of justice, national justice, was not followed, and that resulted the Americans are now persona non grata there. Nobody wants Americans there. The influence is that of Iran. And Afghanistan, you all know what the Americans did in Afghanistan. They destroyed the country, fought for 20 years for nothing. I mean, you couldn't understand why the Americans were fighting all the time there and what was the reason behind fighting. For 20 years. 20 years is a long time. It's more than an era. But there was a faulty strategy, and the American generals perhaps at the wit's end, and the net result was an ignoble retreat. Well, the retreat is okay. Napoleon retreated, Hitler retreated. Part of it. It's part of history. Part of war. You retreat. But it's the way you retreat that's important. And in 20 years, they really destroyed Afghanistan. Where is Afghanistan now? I don't have to tell you, you all know. It's in a terrible situation. It's gone back to the medieval ages. And who's responsible for it? You also know that. You see, any place the Americans have gone in, they have created devastation. They don't win, of course, and the net result is they leave and go away, and that's the end of the story. Look at Iran, what the Americans did. They propped up the Shah of Iran there. The CIA had carried out a coup in early 50s or something, and the Shah was put into power, and Shah was a man who was a bigot, and the Americans were supporting him. Ultimately, the Shah had to run away, and then the Americans dropped him like a hot potato. They said, okay, we don't want anything to do with you now. He wasn't allowed by Jimmy Carter to settle in America, and he had to go and request Anwar Sadat, the Egyptian president, and he went and stayed there. And that's also a fact. Now, when you come to all these things, you realize that what the Americans are always doing is something which is not correct. Or maybe their estimates are wrong. They might be having noble intentions, but intentions alone do not help out. Iran is an example. It is now in the hands of an ultra-conservative, Shia-dominated country, and is the number one enemy of America. They've tried all sorts of things everywhere, and now they have gone in Ukraine. Before that, you must remember, they tried to invade Cuba also way back in 59 when the CIA organized, I think it was 61, when the CIA organized an invasion of Cuba when Kennedy had just taken over as president. And that was also defeated by the Castro brothers, aided by Che Guevara, and that was the end of America there. If you look at all the places, wherever the Americans have intervened, you can have a look, you can pick up any country in the world, they have brought in nothing but devastation. Maybe it's something to do with astrological signs, I mean, the horoscope, some of the position of the planets, maybe an astrologer will be able to tell us why this is like this, but this is the fact. And now I come to Ukraine. There's a lot of backslapping going on. Russian cruiser has been sunk. Some of the expatriates are going and talking like somebody went and shot 6 Russian planes, 2 helicopters, all that, you know. There's an euphoria. But then one should not forget that there are 5 million refugees who've run away from home. Their cities are destroyed. The agriculture in the country is finished. The granary of Europe has ceased to exist. India is taking advantage. Now India is going to be the wheat supplier in the world. India has offered it. Offered wheat to Egypt, and Egypt's got no choice. Egypt is the biggest importer of wheat in the world. And now they are going to take it from India. So what has Ukraine gained? Before I go further, I'd like to digress to a historical incident from the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata, as you know, is one of the very ancient Indian tomes. We call it Granth, which was written about 5000 BC. That's a long time back. And it delineates the story of two families, the Kauravas and the Pandavas, who had a big battle at Kurukshetra, which is now in Haryana. After the battle was over, all the Kauravas, there were 100 of them, they were all killed. King Dhritarashtra wanted to embrace the warrior Bhim. Now, why did he want to do it? As a father, he felt hurt because 100 of his sons had been killed. And he had thought that if I catch Bhim in my arms, I will crush him to death. Now, Lord Krishna, who was present, had read the mind of the king, and in place of the warrior Bhima, he substituted with a stone statue. Now, the king actually was blind. He had been blind from childbirth, and he embraced Bhima, which was actually the statue of Bhima, and he crushed it to death, the statue. Later he realized what he had done, but then he was thankful that he had not crushed to death the real Bhim. Now, if you look at the case of Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, he is something like Bhima. And Dhritarashtra is the United States. So anybody who goes into an embrace with Uncle Sam gets destroyed. I already pointed out, historically, how the Americans have literally brought about devastation wherever they've gone. And Zelensky has done the mistake of having embraced Joe Biden. And what he has achieved? Nothing. He brought Ukraine to ruin. And once Joe Biden has taken Zelensky in his embrace, he's crushed him, and the Ukrainians are crushed. That's what has happened. Just like the stone statue was crushed by the king in the Mahabharata, same thing is happening in Ukraine. Americans had good intentions. They probably wanted to help, but then the result is something different. And history is not going to forgive Mr. Zelensky for the perfidy which he has done in getting his entire country destroyed. And all this could have been avoided. Definitely. There was no necessity to get into a war with Russia and create a war psychosis and a hatred of the Russian people. I have not been able to understand this, but maybe a look at history will show that during World War II, a large number of Ukrainians collaborated with the Nazis. Maybe that's a hangover, and they have a hatred of the Russian people. Maybe the Russians also don't like them. It's tit for tat. But what is the result? Had Zelensky been a statesman, followed the great foreign ministers of world history, he would have played his cards very adroitly. He would not have antagonized Russia. He would have kept Ukraine's independence and made progress. He's done nothing. He's antagonized Russia. He's gone into a war with them. He's got his country destroyed. It's immaterial whether he wins a battle here and there. Fact is, about 25% of the territory has been occupied by Russia, and today, I'm told the Russian offensive in the Donbass region has begun. They may not have a 100% victory, but they're going to take some territory, and they're taking more and more territory every day. And what is he going to do? I really don't know. He's thinking he get more weapons from the United States, and the United States is ready to give more weapons so long as the American soldiers don't come there and give battle. So long that happens, it's okay. And what does this show? It shows that the Americans are learning from their mistakes. Now they do not wish to commit their ground troops anywhere. They'll give you weapons, they'll give you guns, they'll give you everything. Do the fighting. We're not going to come there. But that is the clue to the thinking of the Americans. They're not bothered about Ukraine so long as the battle continues. Good enough, let it continue. Their idea is to destabilize Europe so that the small European countries, Belgium, Poland, all these countries get frightened, and they're already frightened. They started expelling the Russian diplomats here and there, not realizing that in case there's a nuclear war, countries like Belgium, Holland, Denmark, they just cease to exist. 2 or 3 thermonuclear bombs, and that's the end of these countries. I fail to understand how anybody can be so callous in his approach. And that is something I've got no explanation. Maybe there is one small penchant. If you look at the last 1,000 years of the history of Europe, it's been a history of wars. And the 20th century in particular, we have seen Europe as the epicenter of 2 world wars. That means the Europeans have a penchant for war. I mean, they just want to have war and keep on fighting. It's all very good. But it's a different ball game now with the nuclear powered bombs, the thermonuclear bombs, the hydrogen bombs. And once that happens and the fuse goes up, it's going to be total destruction. But I'm afraid the Americans really not concerned, as I've said. They're interested in the hegemony and creating the pot boiling. Joe Biden is looking at his TRPs in the United States, which are even below Donald Trump now. And he must be pretty scared that in 2024, which is not very far now, Donald Trump may come back. And Donald Trump is a different man. He always said NATO is obsolete and he might have a different policy. He had a great admiration for Putin. Putin, of course, has miscalculated, as already pointed out in my earlier videos. But then he's achieved some of his aims. I'll talk about that in another video. But at this particular point, I just want to bring out this fact that the Americans are not the best people to ally with. And I hope the Indian Prime Minister Modi keeps this in mind. Because tomorrow, India allies with the United States and there's a scrap with China, a fight. Are the Americans going to come on your side and fight with China? They're going to do that. They're not done. They might give you some weapons here and there. But then you'll be the person in the frying pan. Gentlemen, this is food for thought. I've just given 2 examples from ancient mythology and the Mahabharata to show that the United States is not the country to ally with. And that is something I would like somebody to contest with me. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been very nice talking to you all. I thoroughly enjoyed talking this time. It's been wonderful. Thank you. Keep watching. Remain happy. And let's pray the nuclear exchange doesn't take place. Goodbye and Jai Hind.